Dear Blueberry friends, today we are taking a closer look at one of the, in our opinion, best and most atmospheric horror films of 2024. We are delving into the past and looking at an important horror film tradition and its origins. We are talking about vampire films, but very specific ones, namely the film adaptations of Bram Stoker's novel Dracula. We will take a closer look at the German silent film Nosferatu from 1922, take a short detour to Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula adaptation from 1992, and finally end up at Robert Eggers' Nosferatu remake from 2024. Today we are particularly interested in how the female main character is dealt with in these interpretations of the material, and will find that, despite all best efforts, the most recent version might be lacking in its message, but we will come to that later. By the way, I am Wolfgang and today I am your host. Let's dive right in. Be warned, there are spoilers for the novel Dracula, Friedrich Wilhelm Murnau's movie Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror, the film Bram Stoker's Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola, and, of course, Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. The characters in the Dracula story have different names depending on the film version, so let's start with a brief overview of the characters that we need for our examination. As we will mainly be looking at the Nosferatu film adaptations, I will be using the Nosferatu names throughout the video to avoid confusion. First, of course, there is the eponymous Count Dracula himself. In the Nosferatu films, he is called Count Orlok, but it is basically the same character. He is an immortal vampire, a supernatural being, and he is the perfect canvas for all kinds of attributions and symbolism. The nuances of the interpretations range from absolute evil to a projection screen for the sexual liberation of the female characters. Mina Harker, born Murray, is just as important and above all the focal point of this observation. In Nosferatu, her name is Ellen Hutter. But as with the Count, this is the same character with slight changes. Ellen grows up in a society that thinks little of female sexuality. And unfortunately, this society thinks just as little of good psychotherapeutic treatment, because Ellen shows clear signs of severe trauma connected with her repressed sexuality. But those around her only talk of melancholia and hysterical fits. She is newly married to her husband Thomas Hutter, Jonathan Harker in the novel version, and loves him more than anything. She sees him as her salvation from her severe mental crisis, which unfortunately turns out to be a false hope. Ellen from Robert Eggers' Nosferatu also has a particularly strong connection to the supernatural world and is referred to as walking between worlds during bouts of sleepwalking. Then there is Dr. Abraham van Helsing, a physician and expert on the occult and supernatural. He is not of great importance in the 1922 film, but he is in Eggers' Nosferatu. There he is called Professor Albin Eberhard von Franz, and he is the only doctor who really understands Ellen Hutter. There are also a number of supporting characters, such as a family friend of the Hutter couple with whom Ellen stays during Thomas's absence. The basic framework of our vampire story remains the same in all iterations, so here is a brief summary of the Nosferatu film adaptations. Trainee real estate agent Thomas Hutter is sent to the Carpathian Mountains to sell Count Orlok a dilapidated villa in the German town of Wisborg. Once there, he quickly realizes that not everything is above board. The natives warn him about the castle. There are strange things going on. Orlok only speaks to him at night, and we spectators in particular know that he should get out as quickly as possible, but he does not. The sinister Count has him sign the purchase contract, locks him up in his castle, and travels by ship to Wisborg to haunt Ellen Hutter. He brings pestilence and rats with him. Ellen must learn that she alone has the power to banish evil and sacrifices herself in an act of love with the vampire to save the town. So far, so simple. Depending on the interpretation, the vampire has very different reasons for declaring Ellen his victim. In Murnau's silent film, for example, it is an accident. Thomas drops a portrait of his beloved from his pocket, and the vampire immediately sets his sights on her beauty and purity. Coppola, on the other hand, interprets the material in a particularly unusual way. He provides us with a backstory for the demonic count, who becomes a vampire when his wife, Elisabetta, commits suicide. Coppola's Ellen, in his film she is called Mina Harker, like in the novel, is a reincarnation of this very Elisabetta, and so she has a direct, very personal connection to Dracula, a kind of true nature, which she discovers in an intense affair with him. Unlike Murnau, Coppola's Dracula is a tragic figure who needs and wants to be rescued. Murnau's Orlok is evil through and through. Eggers places the character Ellen Hutter at the center of his story. His Ellen is an interesting and complex female character who is not only in a state of struggle and rebellion against oppressive male societal structures. Alongside Nosferatu, she is the most powerful character. Since childhood, she has had the ability to walk between the supernatural world and the world of the living, manifested through convulsive fits and sleepwalking. Although she has little to no control over this ability, it gives her powers that set her apart from all the other characters. And it is these powers that bring Nosferatu onto the scene. In her youth, Ellen feels alone and abandoned by the world as pubescent teenagers sometimes feel. In a fit that makes her switch worlds, she sleepwalks naked in the garden. Her father sees it, is horrified by her nakedness, and cries shame on her. In her distress, she stretches out her hand into the supernatural spheres, and Nosferatu willingly reaches out to help her in these dark times, sexually motivated, of course. But Eggers' Nosferatu is also evil, through and through, and can only be temporarily put in his place by Ellen when she meets Thomas. When Thomas then appears in Orlok's castle, sent without his knowledge by Nosferatu's servant, the vampire's perfidious plan is revealed. He wants to have his way with Ellen again after many years. To this end, he takes the entire town hostage and covers it with rats and plague. Ellen has 3 nights to willingly surrender to the vampire, otherwise he will destroy the town and everyone she holds dear, such as Thomas, who has returned in the meantime. In contrast to Murnau's original, Eggers' Ellen Hutter has much more agency as a character. Her Nosferatu, as Alison Lanier describes in her essay The Enduring Mistake of Nosferatu and Misogyny, which by the way I highly recommend reading, is not only an ancient evil, but also a repressed aspect of herself and her assumed guilt. We see how, in a world of oppressive factors, she is the only one capable of clearly assessing danger. She is misunderstood, her warnings of evil are not believed, in fits she is chained to her bed by her doctor and has to realize that she is completely on her own. She must now find the courage to face the inevitable evil. Even Alben Eberhard von Franz can only support her independence, he cannot help with the actual vampire expulsion. In contrast, Murnau's Ellen accidentally falls victim to the vampire and is able to drive him away through a selfless act of love. But the structures of her world force her into the situation, although she ultimately decides to make the sacrifice of her own free will. Coppola's Mina Harker is forced by her past life to confront the vampire. In a way, her sacrifice is her destiny. Eggers' Ellen fights for her independence and uses it to defeat the demon that represents a part of herself. But this is precisely where the movie is at odds with itself. While the other interpretations of Ellen succeed in conquering an evil that they have not summoned and was forced on them, modern Ellen conjures up the evil in the first place, out of an act of being misunderstood and her repressed sexuality. If the Nosferatu were a very personal evil that only she had to suffer from, it wouldn't be so bad, but with her act of desperation she lays waste to an entire town. Unlike in Murnau's original, the time context is not as significant. There is no Spanish flu here, for which the plague rats provided an image in 1922, nor is there a world war that has just ended and needs to be dealt with by Murnau's vampire story. No, it is actually Ellen alone who is mainly responsible for this great evil. You could say that it is also her duty then to get rid of it, and that leaves us with a bad aftertaste. The father who finds her nakedness shameful, the doctor who has her tied to the bed, the family friends to whom she only seems to be a burden, they all get off scot-free morally. The movie stumbles into the familiar and oh-so-told pattern: women with normal sexual needs cause problems. Ellen causes the mass death of an entire town, and when you consider how much effort was put into the great character of Ellen Hutter, how nuanced and complex she shows and conquers aspects of female oppression, it almost seems like an oversight on the part of the screenwriters to make this mistake. Because one thing is very clear, this movie is not trying to be anti-feminist or misogynistic, quite the opposite. For the most part, it succeeds brilliantly in showing a complicated and strong woman conquering her inner and outer demons. Only when viewed from a distance do all these successes seem like an empty achievement, an insignificant effort for which Ellen ultimately even sacrifices her own life. Do you agree with our take, and did you like Robert Eggers' Nosferatu? Let us know in the comments below, and if you are interested in Kiel's film culture, consider subscribing to our channel here. You will find films by local artists, weekly reviews from the sneak preview at our local cinema, short analyses, and occasionally longer essays like this one. We hope you enjoyed this video, and we will see you in the next one.